From the beginning, Young Justice was an incredibly ambitious show. Even so, the show mostly managed to balance that ambition with a tight focus on a core cast of characters. We delved deep into who they are, what made them that way, and my favorite moments in the first season were easily those where we slowed down a bit and took the time to connect with them. They were the heart of the show, and the more I watched, the more I got invested in them. Despite the fact that it's been years since I watched the first season, I remember some episodes really well. Like the one where Kid Flash had to take this heart in a frozen container to save someone. Up until then, I hadn't really enjoyed him all that much, but throughout that episode, he was challenged about his positions, about his childishness, forced to be more mature, and ultimately be pretty clever. He had to face his weaknesses, go through something bad, and come out the other side a better person. It was a focused, personal conflict. And those were the best conflicts in Young Justice. Then there were other cases where, despite casting a much wider net, the show was still able to be equally personal. In particular, the episode where all the characters are in this sort of simulation that goes wrong. That one was really interesting. It cut deep. Because as you watched everything unfold, all the characters dropped one by one and they made decisions that reflected a weakness within themselves. Something that they didn't want to face, but that only came out of them in a dark moment that they didn't understand. And Young Justice didn't just brush aside this episode. No, it ran with it and spent the whole following episode focused on the after effects of this horrible event. And it only made this more interesting by giving these characters different reactions to what happened. For example, Superboy's response, it still sticks with me. Everyone else is terrified about what happened, and Superboy the whole time seems to be feeling shameful and guilty about something, so, you probably assume it's pretty similar. But then he goes for his therapy session, and he says basically that he felt fulfilled in that simulation. No matter how terrible things got, no matter how many people that were lost, he was finally Superman. Again, the personal moments were what sold me on Young Justice and what kept me watching moving forward. I wanted to see more of these characters, to learn more about them, to see how they would grow. But in season 2, something strange happened. There was a massive time skip. Now, I'm not here to tell you that season 2 was really bad all along or anything like that. I know that plenty of people think that is the peak of Young Justice. But for me personally, it didn't really lean into what I enjoyed about the show. The characters became strangers to me, as their conflicts were brushed aside along with plenty of their development. For example, Robin has become Nightwing and now he's a leader, even though in season 1, his main struggle was with figuring out how to be a leader. So I would have liked to see how he improved in that manner. Meanwhile, Miss Martian, who was afraid of her powers, is now just using them any way she wants, and her and Superboy have broken up. They really stopped focusing as much on the personal lives of these characters, and instead, focus more on an ever-expanding world, on introducing new people, and on plot twists that shock the audience. It would be totally different if I had seen what had happened within that time skip, some of the stuff that led to them making these decisions. Then I would have been totally on board with season 2. But without that information, I felt too distanced from the whole thing. Meanwhile, even some of the new characters weren't exactly treated all that well. I mean, Blue Beetle was a favorite for me with his fear of the scarab that was on him, and he didn't know what to do, and he was afraid it would control him, and then it finally happens, and unlike in season 1 where we slowed down to explore the personal side of something traumatic and horrifying, here that character is no longer really necessary to the narrative, aside from being a plot device, so I never got a follow-up that I found satisfactory. However, I don't want to make it seem like I thought season 2 was terrible. The first time through, the twists and turns kept me engaged, and I watched all the way through to the end without any sort of frustration or annoyance beyond the time skip. It was upon rewatching that I wished there was more to do with the characters. But my point is that, basically, I still enjoyed it quite a bit, even if I found it somewhat disappointing. However, then, after a long break without Young Justice, and it seeming like it probably would never come back again, it did come back again. And we got season 3. Season 3, to me, was the big downfall for Young Justice. It was the part that made me go, oh, no, this isn't for me anymore. Where season 2 had introduced some new characters a bit too quickly for my liking, season 3 took that to a whole new level. Most of the members of the main cast were brand new, and there was just a ton of ideas getting thrown at the screen all the time. So many ideas, and so little time to actually explore those ideas. Characters who hadn't received that much focus would swoop in and solve problems for other characters who were supposed to be the focus at multiple points. There were episodes that were interesting, such as the Vandal Savage flashback, but it also didn't really feel all that well integrated into the story. It felt kind of tangential, like I wanted to get this information, but I don't get why we're getting it here. At the end of the day, the combination of a terrible commentary about social media that felt cloying and obnoxious, the expanding world with these new villains who I didn't care about, even though we still hadn't really dealt with the light and what that threat meant, characters who on paper felt interesting but never got the time they deserved, an animation that was, wow, it was rough. Lots of it was stilted. Often it looked like characters' faces had been copy and pasted onto their bodies. People floating around who were clearly just dragged around through After Effects or something like that. A lot of these clear animation shortcuts that are fine if you don't notice them, but when you do, they really take you out of the moment. However, I kept watching because, well, when season 4 first came out, I got a whole bunch of comments on my old Young Justice videos telling me that season 4 was better. And I figured, hey, why not? Let's see what this is all about. And I was pretty disappointed in the first half of the 4th season. Sure, I definitely enjoyed some of these conflicts more than I had in the previous season. It felt a bit more focused at times, but still, compared to the likes of season 1 and even season 2, no, there was too many issues. In particular, once we got to the Zatanna arc, which split its focus over way too many things. I mean, we've got the Vandal Savage backstory going on with this abysmal animation that looks like a slideshow. And I've heard people defend that, saying that they're all flashbacks, so it's contextualized that way. It's fine because it's like that. No, I totally disagree. It made up about 20% of that arc, so like a full episode of content if you added all that stuff together, and it was just ugly. Sure, there were interesting ideas with Zatanna and her father, but they were big time overshadowed by all these other characters who were thrown into the mix, these apprentices she has, as well as, again, that Vandal Savage stuff. Young Justice bit off more than it could chew. However, I came back for part 2 of season 4 because, really, what's the big deal with watching 13 more episodes? But, oh boy, I shouldn't have done it. I should have given up, but I didn't. Let's start with Aqualad's arc. And of course, the main person there is Aqualad, who's trying to deal with the after effects of Superboy's death, and other people are telling him to kind of take a step back, take a break, collect his thoughts, that sort of thing. But no, Aqualad's too busy. He's got things to do. So that's the first problem we're clearly going to have to deal with. What's going to happen with Aqualad if he refuses to take a step back? Meanwhile, though, Atlantis is in for all sorts of trouble because there's big-time conflict down in the Great Blue Sea. All these different groups are fighting among themselves, and at the same time, Aquaman isn't quite doing that great in his position as a leader. People loved him as a hero, but as a king, well, there are some different problems for him to deal with. Like this big boy prophecy that's unfolding that will lead to the rightful king taking the throne. Obviously, this has Aqualad a little bit nervous because he realizes that someone could be misusing the prophecy to get someone to be the new leader. So, now we have that to deal with. However, at the same time, we have a bunch of other stories. We have Superboy, who's not actually dead. He's in the Phantom Zone with this character he calls Ghosty. Then there's cutaways to Halo, who's dealing with her own issues surrounding identity. There are the Legionnaires, who are trying to stop something terrible from unfolding in the future. There's Miss Martian, who's struggling with her grief, but also needs to go talk to Beast Boy, who is having his own problems that he'll need to deal with. All these ideas are fine enough on paper, but when you're constantly taking time away from the main arc, from Aqualad, it leaves the whole story feeling immensely fractured. I mean, let's just go back to Aqualad's thing for a minute. How is he going to deal with his grief? Well, the answer is that we don't really get to see that. We just get to see characters telling him that he needs to deal with, all while he goes, no, not right now, I'm too busy, I got things to do. And sure enough, he gets things to do, he does them, and then he says, sure, now I can go take some time off. We don't really see what happens over the course of this arc that leads him to that very different decision from where he started. So even though he's making a good choice that should hit, it doesn't hit because I don't know why he's doing this or where it came from when we really didn't spend much time with him at all. Then there's the Aquaman part surrounding who's going to be the ruler here. And that is, it's similarly pretty disappointing. So with this, there's this guy who appears, he protects Atlantis, and it seems like he fulfills the prophecy. So the people all rally around him, they're cheering, they want him as the king, and eventually a vote is held for him to become the king, and Aquaman has to step down. However, here's the thing. This guy, that's actually Aquaman's brother, Ocean Master, who's a big bad villain man, and the Ocean Master we saw before in this arc wasn't really Ocean Master, but a clone that was created by Vandal Savage, and this whole thing is really Vandal Savage's doing. He wants to be able to rule the deep blue sea using this guy as his puppet. So what happens with this? Well, Aquaman returns and he has the crown in his possession, and now they can use this to figure out whether this guy is who he really says he is, which, of course, should reveal that that isn't the case. But something weird happens, which is that he puts on the crown and then he just disintegrates in front of everyone. Turns out this is related to the Lords of Order or something, and they don't want Vandal Savage involved here, so they just zap the guy. It's really anticlimactic, and it doesn't feel like it has all that much to do with what our characters were all about during this arc. But yeah, that's what happens. After this, my immediate question was like, wow, how are the people going to react to this? They really wanted him to be king, and now he's just gone. Well, the answer is that they don't really react much, because it turns out that Aquaman's wife also fulfilled the parts of the prophecy. So Aquaman says, hey, she should be the leader. Let's give the crown to her. And immediately, right away, without hesitation, everyone in this place is like, yeah, woo, she's our leader now. Let's do it. Which, okay. I mean, I had to laugh a little bit because I don't believe that all these people would just immediately change their mind so fast. Like the lemmings just don't care. They do whatever the writers want them to do. And that's honestly the feeling I really had. I could see right through it, right through the character motivation and go, this is just the outcome the writers wanted. So they sped us along to that conclusion. And it was really, really disappointing that the main components of this arc, the leadership debate and Aqualad dealing with his grief, didn't get their proper time to shine. Nah, we were too busy with other stuff. And honestly, with a lot of very ham-fisted, dry dialogue. This is also something that isn't going to go away this whole season. Frequently, characters will sit down at a table and they'll decide that it's exposition times, boys and girls, because they're going to get you, the audience, caught up on Young Justice. They're going to tell you what's going on, what their motivations are, about the past and all that stuff, and you're going to just sit there and you're going to listen to it. If they did this a couple times, I wouldn't really complain, but it is constant. There's one episode where, oh boy, it felt like the whole thing was just these still image flashbacks again, where the characters were going, here's the plan, here's the thing, Zod's involved, and oh my gosh, it was so dry. And yeah, I said it felt like the whole thing, okay? Not that it was the whole thing, because it wasn't. Other stuff happened that episode, but that doesn't change how I felt. Also, yeah, I mentioned a name, I said Zod. If you're a comic book fan, your nipples, they might be stiffening a little bit at that name, Zod. I get the impression that Zod is really important. I have not read the comics. I do not know why he's exciting. The only thing I saw was Man of Steel, where Superman snapped Zod's neck, and that was really infamous. That was a bad thing to do, I guess. That's all I know about this guy. And I don't even know if this is the same Zod, because there's like multiple Zods, which wouldn't matter if this show spent time focusing on building up Zod within its own story, but it doesn't really. Instead, when Lore Zod is introduced, the music, it swells in like this is something really cool, really important. And I went, did I miss something? Who is this guy? There were many moments like that. I mean, let's just jump over to this guy. Razor. Who is Razor? Honestly, I still don't know. A whole episode spends so much of its time devoted to this guy. And it was to the degree that I thought I had forgotten something from prior parts of the show, but I hadn't. Razor just appears here, and it seems like he's related to the Green Lanterns. They know him, they're excited when they find him, but he has different colored rings, and Metron, the guy in the big chair, Metron has been manipulating him to lose hope or something, and I'm speaking in very vague terms because I don't really understand it. I know Razor's looking for someone or something, but that's about it. I have no emotional connection to this, and honestly, I barely even have a plot connection to this. I don't know why I'm supposed to care about Razor. I don't know where he came from. All I know is that he's probably some cool guy from the comics. And moments like these really, really solidify a feeling I've had for a while now, which is that this show it's not really for people who are just fans of the old Young Justice series. It's for people who are massive fans of the DC Comics universe, of all these different characters. The people who, when they see Lord Zod show up, they go, woo, baby, it's Lord Zod. Yeah, that's who this is for. Not for a guy like me that goes, who is he? I don't really care about him. I don't care about Razor either. I don't know who he is. I'm sorry. I don't know if that's a bad thing to say. And I maybe wouldn't complain about it so much if the main figures in these arcs still got their proper time. Yeah, but they don't. With the Zod guys, I could see myself getting interested in it. I mean, Drew Zod seems like a pretty intimidating guy. He wants to rule the world, all that cool stuff. It's nothing too crazy, but it seems like he was taking care of his own people, and he really did care, which gives him this interesting edge where he has his own sense of nobility. And I say that, but when we were focusing on him, there was a part of me that was a bit confused because my brain kept going back to the other villains, to Darkseid on Apocalypse, to Vandal Savage. And I'd go, what happened to that? I get that Darkseid wants to help Lord Zod, but so much stuff is just getting thrown onto the screen, even though we've never really finished dealing with other stuff. I mean, I still really don't know what the Light is up to at the end of the day. It's big things in the work, I guess. See that in season 5. And then there's Rocket. Rocket's been around in this show for a very long time, and based on the intro, I thought that she'd be getting an arc to herself. And she does. Sort of, kind of, not really. We begin Rocket's arc by looking at Rocket at home. She has a kid who's clearly struggling a bit, and it's revealed that the child has autism, and she doesn't really know how to take care of him properly and what he needs. She's struggling as a parent. Immediately, I was interested in this. I wanted to know more about how Rocket's struggles at home would be related to her hero work and how these two sides of her life, how they would feed into each other. But instead, we've got the Zods to deal with, Superboy in the Phantom Zone, losing his mind and all this stuff. We've got Forager romance, which, okay. At first, the Foragers talking was kind of cute, but at a point, it's gotta stop.
Forager. Foragers. Forage. Foragers.
You gotta stop with the Forager talk. And, oh my gosh, I could not have cared less about these bugs and their romance, honestly. I don't know why it needed to be included other than to pull time away from Rocket, I guess. Because Rocket's struggles don't get nearly enough focus. Basically, the gist of it is that there's this guy named Orion and he's one of Darkseid's kids. So, when Rocket learns this and sees that he's acting quite violently at times, she's really nervous. In fact, he has some triggers that really set him off. He's claustrophobic. So, yeah, she's not too trusting of this guy because of the way he'll just flip out. So the way this goes is what you might expect. She comes to have a deeper understanding of Orion, and through that understanding for him and his own way that he needs to be treated, she's able to say, I see you, and take that knowledge back home, sit down with her own kid and go, I see you. On a basic level, I get what they were going for. With both of these, she had a preconceived notion of how someone needed to be treated and how she needed to feel about them, but she ultimately realized that she needed to be more flexible, that she needed to truly look at them and try to understand them. But again, there's so little time actually spent on her. There's little back and forth between her hero life and what's going on at home, other than seeing that she doesn't really feel like she has time for what's going on at home because she's too busy. Here's a random idea that I would have liked to see just to give you a better idea of what I'm looking for. Maybe something goes really bad with her kid back at home, and now, boom, Rocket's got to make a decision. Does she stick around here to do this really important job, or does she go home to take care of her kid? I don't know what the right answer would be, but there we would actually be leaning into her conflicts a bit more, and instead of brushing her aside for all this other stuff that's going on, we would get some moments to sit with her, learn more about who she is, and explore this conflict surrounding her being a mom that I was actually really interested in seeing, but I guess the show wasn't too interested in focusing on that. There's bigger fish to fry. Then there's the final arc of this season, which is primarily focused on getting Superboy out of the Phantom Zone and the fact that he's a little bit messed up right now. He thinks that he serves the House of Zod because he's had his mind deteriorate while he's in the Phantom Zone. And now everyone else, they're trying to get back in there. They're trying to save him, all while stopping the Zods from taking over the world when they escape from the Phantom Zone. Now, this is the type of thing where if you were on board with this season the whole way through, it was probably pretty fun. But if you're like me and you'd already checked out a bit, there's little here to pull you back in, because this is just following up on all this stuff that's been thrown into the show and seeing what happens with it. And I say following up on all of it, but not really all of it. Let's look at Beast Boy for an example. Beast Boy finally goes and gets the help he needs, which has been a consistent undercurrent through this whole season. However, the big reason why he's been so upset is that Superboy is dead, and he blames himself for that. There's a nice scene with the therapist where Beast Boy's really sad and he admits these feelings. But ultimately, it all feels very tangential because we don't even get to see Beast Boy react to Superboy's return. That's how fractured everything is. If they had tied him in somehow, made it so that he's trying to go help Superboy, then suddenly all this time spent on him would have at least made sense, even if it had been a bit misplaced. But instead, no, we don't get that. We don't get that. Like so often in this show, we don't follow up on things. For example, close to the end of season 3, Miss Martian played a part in fooling Artemis into thinking that she was seeing Wally on the other side of the grave. And this happened despite the fact that at the same time, Miss Martian was saying that she felt guilty fooling people and she seemed worried about overusing her powers or misusing them. So I thought, we better get some follow-up on this for her character. And if that's happening, it hasn't happened yet. 26 episodes later. It takes forever to get anything done in this show. And even then, it never feels like you are getting anything done, because when it comes to the moments that this show could have an interesting climax emotionally, we just don't do it. Like with Beast Boy and Superboy. Ugh. Also, and I can't believe that I almost forgot to say this, the fact that Superboy is back in the first place, I honestly kind of hate it. I expected him to come back because, you don't trust these shows. Things always come back. Nothing's permanent. But even so, that doesn't stop me from being frustrated. Because Superboy's death, I actually thought that moment hit pretty hard. Where Miss Martian was crying, she was so sad. You got a sense that this was going to weigh on the characters and change them. And first off, we didn't get to see enough of that. We were too busy with other crap. And second of all, there's no permanency to it because, as I said, and as you already know, Superboy's back and we're gonna save him and all that stuff. From its conception, I don't like this idea. Don't try to fool me into feeling emotional about a conflict that you have no interest in committing to. I hate it. Either way, a lot of people are involved in this. There's a lot of fighting and going back and forth, and they beat Zod and they put him back in there. Miss Martian's brother was involved in a lot of this, and he gets his own little planet from Darkseid for helping him out. It ends off showing that Vandal Savage has kidnapped all of the people who were supposed to be in the Phantom Zone, and it's treated like this is going to lead to some interesting stuff. Oh yeah, also Granny Goodness is back. She's got some new people on her team. One of them is Black Mary, who was in Zatanna's arc. She was all jaded there because they didn't really trust her. And yeah, I guess she's going to be one of the villains next season. At the end of this arc, though, there's a big climactic fight where there's an effort to pull a whole bunch of these characters in, get them a little bit involved, and that sort of thing. Probably some of the best animation in this season. But this isn't a compliment to that. That's more so just showing a problem with the rest of the show. Much like with season 3, the animation is stiff. It is awkward. It is so... like, it looks rough. It really looks rough. From the actual action, like people attacking each other, there's often very little weight to it, to the facial expressions that characters have. When they switch between expressions, sometimes it's so rough. And I feel a bit bad for going on and on about it again, because I'm sure that there was constraints put upon this show that led to this sort of stuff. But it doesn't change the fact that when I'm watching it, this is what I'm watching. And I'm still comparing it back to seasons 1 and 2, which looked so much better. Overall, it seems that people who are still on board for Young Justice really liked this. I mean, I went to the IMDb ratings for this. Whoa! The scores for these episodes are fantastic. But honestly, I don't get it anymore. The Young Justice train, it's moving along and I got pushed off. I got pushed off by countless DC Comics characters who I don't know flooding into the cars, cramming everything, and now everybody's getting pushed out except for the people who are able to just slide between them. I don't know about this metaphor. It's getting a bit long-winded, but I think you get my point. Instead of using characters from the comics to tell a compelling story, this show is content to lean on the comics for any source of emotion. I mean, I just remembered that one of the Green Lantern guys dies. I didn't have a good understanding of why this should hit hard, because I didn't know who he was, even if I could tell that he's probably pretty important in the comics. All this is to say that, yeah, Young Justice Season 4 didn't do it for me. Young Justice has entirely lost me. I think this show has fallen incredibly far, and I don't really plan to watch it again unless people come back and tell me that it's great again or something. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this unscripted little thing, just me getting my thoughts out there. If you want to see my other videos on Young Justice, I've got plenty of those, even if some of them are pretty old. Thank you to all my patrons. Thank you to you for making it to the end of this video, and I hope you have a great day.